My old childhood bedroom. They really seem to have stripped it of my touch, haven't they? But they did keep the dinosaur light switch. Glad they know what's still important. I remember this nightstand. When I was a kid, I put something very important in there. I just can't remember. I don't understand. This wasn't a thing when I was a kid, and it definitely wasn't the thing I put in the nightstand. What does it mean? So yeah, I went out and ordered the Five Nights at Freddy's official book trilogy. I got the box set. It comes with 3 books, obviously. And it also came with this poster that I haven't looked at yet. So let's just take a look at it now. Wow. I am having unexplainable sensations right now. Who is this? It looks like Circus Baby, but she's much too, You know what? I'll find out. I hope. But naturally, we're starting out with Five Nights at Freddy's The Silver Eyes. Now, before we dive in, let's pretend for a moment that I have no idea what Five Nights at Freddy's is. I'm at the Barnes & Noble, and I see this on the bookshelf. It's looks like it has a Terminator bear on it. Now, I'm thinking, ooh, killer robot story. I'm gonna take this home and read it. So, I read it, and what are my thoughts? In this town of Hurricane, Utah, that's gotta be a made-up town. Let me look this up real quick. Oh, it's real. Hurricane, Utah. Hurricane, Utah. Has Utah ever even seen a hurricane? No, it hasn't. Isn't that like naming your town like King Tide, Oklahoma or something like that? It says that founder Erastus Snow named the town Hurricane when a whirlwind blew the top off his buggy and he declared that it must have been a hurricane. Well, okay, Erastus. Why don't you focus on finding a new name for yourself before you start naming towns, huh? But I digress. In Hurricane, Utah, you've got Charlie, real name Charlotte, but she hates being called that. John, Carlton, Jessica, Lamar, Marla, Jason? If I forgot someone, I'm sorry. They're reuniting in their childhood town for a commemoration ceremony for a scholarship in the honor of their dead childhood friend, Michael Afton. In commemoration of their childhood friend, Michael Brooks, who was murdered at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza 10 years prior. As the friends explore the ruins of the old restaurant and unlock suppressed memories, they come to learn the full extent of the tragedy, and that its impact lives on to this day, perhaps in the form of the animatronic mascots who may still have life in them. So yeah, overall I got major Stephen King's It vibes from this book. You've got childhood friends reuniting in their backwater childhood town on the anniversary of a tragedy that occurred in their childhood as the ghosts of the past threaten to resurge once more. It is to be noted, has much less superfluous lore, significantly less cosmic horror, and a relieving lack of child orgies. This is young adult after all. In terms of presentation, this book is a very easy read. The pace is brisk and the widely spaced text made its 389 pages just fly by. This isn't a bad thing by itself, don't get me wrong, but I mean, this is still young adult horror, so compared to like more adult-centric horror, there's less time spent on things like heavy themes and emotional turmoil and burning implications and good stuff like that. I also tend to find that adult horror is more experimental with its like POVs and the way it conveys information. The storytelling in this book is pretty standard. The characters are serviceable. Carlton had a few good zingers. Charlie's flashbacks are the obvious highlights, but other than that, pretty standard. And of course the actual horror itself is toned down compared to what else is out there. Don't get me wrong, there are still a few very effective moments when Spring Bonnie kills Officer Dunn, when actual Bonnie is stalking Charlie through the bathrooms, and when Creepy Dave, that's what I'm going to call him, he refuses to talk to the protagonist until he has the Spring Bonnie mask on. All good stuff. Nothing I'd really call spine-chilling yet, though. Now, I have heard that the later books do get very graphic and scary, like reimagining Security Breach levels of scary, but I'm going to have to read on and find that because I haven't seen it yet. Now, the cover lists Scott Cawthon and Kira Breed Risley as the authors. Breed Risley is a ghostwriter, as I came to find out, who specializes in young adult. So what that suggests to me is that while Cawthon pretty much did like the story outline and the blueprints and all that, the actual writing we see is Breed Risley's. Finding more information, however, proved to be difficult as she went to lock down her social media accounts on Cawthon's suggestion to avoid, and I quote, "weirdos and creeps who would stalk her on the internet." Good call. So yeah, overall a brisk, lightly entertaining read. I wouldn't call it anything groundbreaking, but of course there's so much more to this book than meets the eye. The Silver Eye, maybe. Firstly, I did appreciate how the book didn't have to rely on prior knowledge of the franchise. It could be potentially enjoyed by anyone, but what about a FNAF enjoyer like myself? I approached this novel in a unique position, that being someone who knew next to nothing about the books themselves, but was up to date with the game's lore. From what I gathered, some fans were upset with the Silver Eyes because they were expecting some answers to their lore questions, when really all they got was an alternative retelling of the story they already knew. Basically, this novel serves as like a chronological sequel to FNAF 1 with elements of 2 and 3 as sort of flavor enhancers. The original restaurant has been buried in some sort of dummy shopping mall. Fredbear's Family Diner is little more than a tomb at this point, but it's still just as equally an important setting and plot point. The Springlock suits are also there, with pre-Springtrap William Afton as the main antagonist. That's a Creepy Dave I mentioned before. Henry's also there, albeit in the form of memories and impact, as he's been dead for 10 years apparently. And as far as I could tell, there was no mention of the toy animatronics or the FNAF 2 restaurant at all. The lore in this book is like entering a room you once knew, but everything's been replaced and rearranged. You could still see it as the same room, but you still have to refamiliarize yourself with its contents and its layout. Is this a bad thing, though? Well, if you were expecting the novel to be like a lore guidebook, then you were probably let down. I thought this was supposed to explain things. I can't believe they tricked me into reading a book! But otherwise, I was able to enjoy the book for what it was supposed to be, which is kind of like an alternate reality, kinda sorta canon retelling of the story we had already pieced together from the games. And this isn't what I think, it's actually what Scott Cawthon came out and admitted. It's as if the game's narrative were the ghost story your dad told around the campfire, and the story in the book is the same ghost story told by his kids to their kids, although things have been updated or misremembered or replaced over time. It was an experiment, and honestly, I commend Scott Cawthon for going ahead and doing something unorthodox that wouldn't please some of his fans. That doesn't mean you can't get anything useful out of it, however. For example, while the games are kind of dubious and kind of fragmented about the relationship between Golden Freddy and Fredbear, the Silver Eye seems to suggest that they're explicitly derived from one another. Golden Freddy is presented as a manifestation of Fredbear, distinct from the other animatronics and endowed with supernatural powers that are beyond their scope. This was very interesting to me. It struck me as some kind of like commentary on like the power of like memory and legacy or something like that. It's common in fiction for spirits to manifest from like memories and unfinished business, but the way it was presented in the book was pretty clever in my opinion. What if Golden Freddy and Fredbear are like expressions of the same entity, like wholly distinct but one and the same, like the Holy Trinity but with more bears? Therefore, from my first impressions, it would be wise to see the books as supporting documents for the FNAF franchise, not necessarily gospel, like the Apocrypha of Five Nights at Freddy's. I can't believe Five Nights at Freddy's has got me invoking Christianity so much. Maybe there's more to this than I realize. There was one part of the book that really pissed me off, however. It was near the middle when Spring Bonnie kidnaps Carlton and Jason is there to witness the whole thing. He then goes to say that just Bonnie kidnapped Carlton, and of course his sister says, "Oh no, that couldn't have happened, Bonnie's right there on the stage." And then they just kind of forget about Carlton. They go home and they tell his police chief father, who then goes to say that Carlton's just playing a prank on them, and they all just kind of buy that and like they can sleep well that night. First of all, did Jason not know that actual Bonnie was like a bluish color in the books? Like, the book clearly states that Jason saw Spring Bonnie's like yellow color, but instead Jason just insists on giving this sort of like basic, like useless like title, just Bonnie. I can imagine this sort of reductive reasoning from a 6-year-old, but Jason's like 11. Like, kids are stupid, but they're not that stupid at that age. If he had just said the word yellow, that should have raised like 1,000 red flags with Charlie and John, both who, by that point in the story, had both admitted to seeing like suspicious yellow variants of the mascots in their pasts. Also, with Creepy Dave running around and like the old padlocks just appearing out of nowhere, they really brushed it off as something they thought they saw. Especially Carlton's own chief of police father. I mean, it just reeked of like deliberate stupidity to manufacture tension and waste time, and of all the unbelievable things in this book, that one was the hardest to swallow. I'm telling you, Mrs. Burke became my favorite character in the books after she finally knocked some sense into those jamokes. So yeah, that part was pretty bad, but it didn't ruin the experience for me. Overall, I was pleased with this book, and it was a nice first dive into the pool that is the FNAF trilogy, and I can't wait to see where the other two go. On another note, I know there's also like graphic novel adaptations, but frankly, I'm not interested. I mean, not only is it technically the same story, but the art just looks awful. Like, it looks like one of those drug PSA comics they had us read in grade school. I'm pretty sure there are like projects by fan artists to like redesign the art as seen in the graphic novels, and from what I've seen, like almost anything is better than what we got. So yeah, with this book out of the way, I can finally start The Twisted Ones. I'm not actually going to film it. I still don't get it. Why is Five Nights at Freddy's, of all things, appearing in pivotal moments of my childhood? I remember this grave. On my 12th birthday, I received a pellet gun, and the first thing I did with it was shoot and kill a squirrel. And out of guilt and remorse, I buried it in my backyard. No. What does it mean? So I just got done reading Five Nights at Freddy's, The Twisted Ones. Just like with the Silver Eyes, I'm going to look at the book from two angles. One, how it is as a book, and two, how it is as a Faz book. Because it's important to recognize that art needs to be able to stand on its own, independent from the property it's attached to. A year after the traumatic events at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, Charlie is looking to move on with her life, but the past is unwilling to let go. And the present is faring no better, as corpses begin turning up in abandoned fields around her college campus bearing familiar wounds. As Charlie re-enters the world she wished to have left behind, she uncovers a conspiracy deeper than she ever knew, and secrets more horrible than she ever could have imagined. The first notable thing about The Twisted Ones is that it is about 100 pages shorter than The Silver Eyes, with the same brisk pace and font layout. I seriously started this book one evening, went to bed, woke up the next morning, and finished it. I think the one thing we can all agree on is that this experience was a quick one. What are the book's positives? Well, for one, the cast of characters has been cut about in half, which I appreciated. I thought the side characters got a bit superfluous in The Silver Eyes, so it was good to have some more focus this time around. Charlie's given more development this time around rather than just her backstory, as she's beginning to embody her father's traits, for better or for worse. The obsession with her work, the interest in robotics, the fascination with imitating life in the lifeless, all good stuff. I also vibe with the mystery element espoused in the first half of the book. Mutilated bodies in fields, freshly disturbed graves, these new freaky robots that seemed specifically designed to kill. I was having fun with it. Keyword was. There are several ideas introduced in this book that just don't go anywhere. For example, I was really enjoying the framing device of Dr. Treadwell's robotics classes, where she discusses kind of the logic behind perception and pattern recognition. I thought it was going to lead to some greater theme about the difference between reality and illusion and all that, but instead it just leads to illusion discs, I guess. Illusion discs. Those two little robots that Charlie's working on that have these genuinely creepy, half-baked conversations with each other, yeah, those don't go anywhere either. There's also this side sequence where Clay explains how he and his wife divorced after she found out that he had salvaged the original animatronics, brought them into the basement, and was spending his nights trying to get them to talk to him. I remember reading that and thinking, wow, this would make for a great side plot if it weren't relegated to an exposition dump. Seriously, I'd rather read an entire book about that than whatever the hell the climax was. Oh yeah. The climax. No joke, I had to reread the climax 3 times just to understand what was going on. You know how some people say that writers will throw whatever ideas they have at the wall and see what sticks? This was if Scott Cawthon's brain exploded and they scraped the brain matter and the skull shards off the wall and turned that into the climax. You have all these illusions, holograms, mascots, creatures of unknown origin, all the animatronics duke it out in some big robot battle royale. A Springtrap shows up for 5 minutes, and then all these cliffhangers are just plopped into your lap like carpet bombs at the end. It was insanity, and not in a good way. I felt like I was reading some sugar high 11-year-old's fan fiction.
Balloon Boy shows up. Now there's lots of Balloon Boys, and there's a monkey, a bird, a waterfall, and Springtrap's there too. All the animatronics fight each other in some big epic battle, and
I tend to tune out young adult isms like cheesy romance or characters not acting like real people for the sake of the plot. I mean, what else was I expecting? It's young adult fantasy horror. Things just don't have to make sense all the time. I mean, call it a personal taste thing, but it's just not my thing. Like The Silver Eyes, I managed to accomplish that with The Twisted Ones, except for one part. Early on, Charlie keeps remarking that she's been doing sit-ups, I guess? And I remember reading that and thinking, oh, please don't come back around in the end and be totally stupid.
uh-oh, how unfortunate.
That was the first time in a long time I have ever audibly groaned when reading a book. I fail to understand how authors, paid career writers, can just put things like that in a book and not think, oh wow, this is total cringe. So yeah, as a book, I was invested at first, but I soon became unimpressed and annoyed. But of course, there's more to this book than just overstuffed young adult mystery horror. If The Silver Eyes was a sequel to FNAF 1 with elements of 2 and 3 as flavor enhancers, this book was like Sister Location thrown into a food processor and then dumped on a plate with 2, 3, and 4 as garnish, I guess. It should go without saying that at this point, the book's continuity compared to the games has just jumped off the rails, and if you're not along for the ride, you're just going to drive yourself insane. They're doing their own thing at this point. Let's just accept that. So the Twisted animatronics are supposed to be like this universe's interpretation of the Funtime animatronics. I mean, they were designed by Afton, their jaws unhinge, they were designed to capture children, they have holding chambers in them. I mean, these things are clearly inspired or like some kind of prototype at the very least. And the underground pizzeria is similar to Circus Baby's entertainment and rental with the presence of Balloon Boy as kind of like the FNAF 2 zest. And as for the illusion discs being present in the games, that's a theory, a game theory, but it still doesn't change the connection between the Twisteds and the Funtimes. The official art for the Twisted's illusionary forms has striking similarities to the Nightmare animatronics. Whether there's supposed to be a link there, I don't know. But considering the pre-existing links between 4 and 5, I wouldn't be surprised if there's some sort of bleed over between the illusions and the nightmares our FNAF 4 protagonist is having. I still stand by what I said in my Silver Eyes reviews, where the books are kind of like supporting documents that might give helpful details rather than straight up canon. I think that's the most we're going to get out of them. Otherwise, the story's just doing its own thing, and I don't see how this is going to tie in with FNAF 6 in the end. Now I just have to read The Fourth Closet because I just have to see how it all ends, in spite of my irritation with the Twisted ones. Especially considering all those aforementioned carpet-bombed cliffhangers. So Afton admits that he actually did kidnap Charlie. So who's Charlie? Does this all have something to do with that Tracy Horton lady they kept harping on in the middle of the book? Does it have to do with Sammy? Was there even a Sammy? Is Charlie Sammy? Now I will admit this. I do remember binging Matt Pat's FNAF videos years ago when they were first coming out. And if the answer is what I think I remember it is, well, time to finally break this book's spine. Figuratively. Although it might be literally, depending how much the answer pisses me off. Figures that my journey of self-discovery would take me to the attic. A very dear friend of mine made this especially for me. I miss her. Glad to see it's still intact. Oh, son of a bitch! Wait. I think I get it now. Okay, jokes aside, I feel as though I can't tackle this book in the traditional structure as my previous book reviews because The Fourth Closet, at this point, has careened so far off the rails of the FNAF games narrative, I can hardly even call it a Faz book anymore. It's 6 months after the harrowing events at the underground pizzeria. John is trying to pull himself together, deal with witnessing Charlie's apparent death, and navigate around the supposed imposter Charlie that's mysteriously appeared in his life. As the friends reunite and another suspicious pizzeria opens up in their town, the race is on to solve the looming mystery once and for all, and finally put years of entangled secrets to rest. I will say one thing about The Fourth Closet that I couldn't say about the other two. The pace has taken a turn for the reserved, almost the pensive. Characters and moments are allowed to unfurl, to fester, I was pleasantly surprised at this choice, as it allowed for some of the best moments in the trilogy to reveal themselves in the fourth closet. John's inner turmoil as he tries to adjust to a less than satisfying life, with only a few macabre mementos of Charlie's as a reminder. Pretty much any scene with Afton in it, he's a much more chilling and dignified antagonist this time around. I was getting serious, like Mason Verger vibes from him, and the silent menace of hot Charlie actually got under my skin a few times. So yeah, for the first time in this trilogy, my nerves were a little racked. So I gotta give credit to the fourth closet where credit's due. Although there were still a few really stupid moments that did not sit well with me. For one, while I was pleased to see those creepy conversation bots make a comeback, the manner in which they play into the plot is just dumb. The protagonists take the earpieces the robots are using and reverse engineer them to make them completely invisible to the animatronics that Afton built. I could not bring myself to believe that that technology would have jumped from the little conversation bots Charlie was working on to the fully fledged super advanced robotics that Afton was building, especially one as like super futuristic as a hot Charlie. Charlie, you developed a way to make human beings invisible to the most advanced AI the world has ever seen. Why aren't you selling this technology to the United States military or something like that? It's like Plankton inventing all these technological breakthroughs just to steal the Krabby Patty formula. I mean, I think your priorities are misplaced, girl. Then again, I could be asking Afton the same question. Also, if hot Charlie's going around murdering everyone in real Charlie's life, then why didn't she ensure that Clayton was fully dead? I mean, she literally ripped the guts out of Aunt Jen, but the guy who was taking photographic proof that you're actually a robot and not a real person, you didn't make sure he was dead? It's just, things like that could have been thought through a lot better, but hey, it's young adult. It's not like anyone has to give a shit. The climax, again, also really annoyed me. Granted, it was a dual climax this time, with the infinitely better paced and structured big reveal between Hot Charlie and Real Charlie being one of the novel's highlights. But the other part, where Carlton, Marla, and Jessica have to rescue the kidnapped children from a Circus Baby's pizza, suffered a very familiar pitfall. It was similar to the Twisted ones, where they just seem to throw everything at you with no rhyme or reason, but the actual writing, the actual writing structure, did not sit well with me. If you watched my On Stranger Tides book review, you know that one of my biggest pet peeves in writing is when intense action scenes are just pages upon pages of unbroken walls of text. No, I don't know if I can call this bad writing or not, but when I read or write action, I really like using paragraph breaks, ellipses, em dashes to simulate the kind of segmented, punchy nature of an action scene. Not only does it provide a visceral syntactic change of pace for the reader, but for me personally, it helps me better understand what the hell's going on. Call it a personal preference, but I really do wish that more books would utilize those tactics. And now we get to the part of this trilogy that everyone seems to remember. Charlie is a robot. The third in a series of 4, with the sort of half Charlie, half Elizabeth Afton, half Circus Baby thing, supposed to be the 4th in the series.
We now return to tonight's Creepy Time Theater presentation of Night of the Robot.
Are you kidding me? She was a robot this whole time? What head-scrambled lunatic thought that up? You call this a twist? More like twisted my balls off. I'm convinced that Scott Cawthon's brain is just a giant sewer rat trapped in a birdcage, jumping around with this cacophonous rattle and... Now, if you remember from my Twisted Ones review, I said that I thought I remembered the twist from Matt Pat's videos, and yeah, I was right. Somewhat. There's actually a possessed doll that's been given sentience from just the extreme emotional turmoil that was literally poured into it from Henry, that's been placed into each incarnation of Charlie. I actually thought that was kind of clever. And let's not pretend this wasn't foreshadowed in the books. The two big things that stuck out to me were like kind of the impressions of the tripod mentioned in the Silver Eyes that Charlie saw, that were later used to kind of film her memories. And the other thing was the fake blood they found in the pizzeria that they supposed belonged to Afton, but actually wasn't his. It was Charlie's. So this was planned from the beginning. Let's not pretend it was something that Scott Cawthon just pulled out of his ass. However, there exist 3 major issues. 1. The silver-eyed animatronic mentioned in The Silver Eyes was very explicitly stated to be Foxy. But in the 4th closet, it's revealed that it was actually Charlie 4, aka Circus Baby Hot Charlie. The text is very clear that it's supposed to be Foxy, but in the 4th closet, it's explained away as Charlie simply misremembering. Many readers went to accuse Cawthon of retconning his own trilogy, and honestly, I don't blame them. If this was a genuine mistake on either his or Breed Risley's part, then yeah, that's a very sloppy and shallow way to try and rectify it. But if it was the plan all along, I'm convinced that Scott Cawthon's brain is just a giant sewer rat. 2. The broader question as to whether such advanced AI and robotic technology belongs in Five Nights at Freddy's in the first place. Now, I know it's ironic coming from me, questioning what does or doesn't belong in FNAF, but the point I'm making is that despite the Silver Eyes and the Twisted Ones deviating from the games on a narrative level, they still coincided with them on a scale of believability or what we knew could be accomplished within the confines of the franchise. So despite the foreshadowing, this inclusion of robots that would have made Neander Wallace jealous felt to many like the tonal equivalent of getting dipped in a vat of acid. I don't think I have a right answer to this. What I can say is that I think it depends on how much you want the Faz books to connect to the games. I don't see the books as very connected to the games at all, and this was just indicative of the trilogy's ludicrous attempts to try and become its own thing. Besides, it's still tied in with greater themes of memory and emotion, especially considering that the heart of it all was still ghosts and possessions, so it didn't offend me as much as I thought it would. You're off the hook this time. 3, and perhaps most glaring, is that the impact of this twist is given no time to breathe. Charlie has no moments of self-reflection after this. She just winds up murder-suiciding Baby 3 minutes later. And none of the other characters learn that she's a robot or deal with the implications themselves. In a franchise where themes of souls and putting life in the lifeless are front and center, for the 4th closet, this just felt like a massive wasted opportunity. The book honestly could have benefited from another 30 pages just dealing with the fallout of this twist. This isn't a personal preference thing anymore. This is just bad writing. But one other burning question remains. How does this book connect to the games? Well, Funtime Freddy's there, which kinda sorta not really busts what I said in the Twisted Ones. Also Funtime Mangle, I guess, is there too. And don't even get me started on Circus Baby. You can just watch Matt Pat for that one. Now, the big thing this book introduces is Remnant. While it doesn't name drop it, it's basically molten soul juice that can be injected into electronics and bodies to kind of transfer the memories and pains of the recently deceased. It's a driving factor in both Sister Location and FNAF 6 and comes to define the sort of a supernatural spirit of this franchise. So that's one really cool thing the book has going for it. So yeah, while the 4th closet offers some of my favorite moments in the trilogy, it still suffers from the same YA stupidity and story problems we've seen in the past. I'm just glad we could end the trilogy on a high-ish note, at least compared to the Twisted Ones. Now, just to make this video longer, my thoughts on the trilogy as a whole. I gotta be honest, I commend Scott Cawthon for taking a risk and telling a story that would piss off a lot of his fans. I know a lot of people were expecting to read these books, expecting answers to their lore questions, but instead all they got was a whole extra narrative to have to dissect. I mean, really though, what else do you expect from this guy? And kudos to Kira Breed Risley for managing to string this story together into a fairly cohesive experience. It could not have been easy, especially with this guy. That said, the experience as a whole is just too variable in quality to fully enjoy. The character highlights and the well-done moments cannot make up for the young adult stupidity and poor story decisions that run throughout. The idea of a divergent canon is a good one, and I think if the books were redone into a more focused, like thriller horror kind of tone, I guess, I think the potential for greatness would have been much better. Side note, I hope that's what the upcoming FNAF movie does. It would be a bad idea to turn it into a lore dump, to try and completely represent the lore instead of work with it, rather. I don't regret reading this trilogy, though. I mean, I like Five Nights at Freddy's, and it was cool to read like an official book saga associated with them. Now, will I read the other books in the series, like the Fazbear Frights or Tales of the Pizzaplex? Maybe, if these videos get enough views. Sorry, I gotta eat too, you know. I understand why the Five Nights at Freddy's books are appearing in my past. Ever since my security breach video took off, my legacy, my life has become Five Nights at Freddy's. I'm faced with a crossroads now. Do I keep making FNAF content, embrace the madness, or make the content I want what's right in my heart?